Everybody asks me what the process is for writing songs. For me, on this album in particular, the difference in the process revolved around rewriting. Just sitting around trying to get the initial idea. I get 2 notebooks, and I work a lot with my guitar player, Mike Rathke, who had everything in the world to do with the success of this album. And we would play, and I'd see it, any ideas, and then he would leave, and I would more or less isolate. And then when I had something going, I would just write straight through, and then I rewrite. Like every song on this album had about 5 or 6 rewrites, and that's essentially the difference between this album and all the other ones. Was the intensity of the rewriting, which is something ever since I was in college that I've hated doing. It's much more fun to just make it up on the spot and then go away, and that's the end of it. And I've been known to do that, as a matter of fact. But when I was a tot, you understand. But this time around, it was like a lot of rewriting, tedious, boring rewriting. It's not as though I had an enormous amount of choice anyway, because every time I sat down to write a song, it had to do with what I perceive as a terrible, terrible situation, which is like symbolized in the city of New York. But as we all know, what happens in the big cities eventually spreads. You know, we've seen this happen over the years, and it seems a shame to have to wait until the kids of the rich people are dropping dead before people start saying, wow, it might have been a good idea to do something about AIDS, or birth control might be a good idea, or pro-choice is really not a bad thing to think about. And all these things being not only really ignored right now, but they're going in the opposite direction. And I'm horrified by it. So it worked its way into a 3-chord rock and roll song, a little vehicle for it. Well, lyrically, I've always been influenced by a man named Delmore Schwartz, who I studied with in college, who in certain instances could do a lot with really simple words. He's the first person I heard do had this great expression, give me enough hope and I'll hang myself. And even paranoids have enemies. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him think. And then there was Raymond Chandler. I always got a kick out of, I love Raymond, who doesn't, right? Love Raymond Chandler, but he had this great line, paraphrasing, Brad, maybe it's not verbatim, that blonde was as pleasant as a split lip. Or that bodyguard was so big it looked like he could hold me in the palm of his hand. It's like, which is how I felt, by the way, when I was in the elevator with Mike Tyson once, who lives at my building, but that's another story that I don't even want to get into. But that kind of use of words is what I've always been interested in writing, because it's a rock and roll song. It's really relatively short. You can't have too many characters in it. And so the image you give somebody has got to hit them so quickly that they can see it. And the whole thing about the New York album and the writing of it was the focus. And, you know, being able to focus on what I wanted you to see. I remember I was sitting in this is before I wrote the thing. I was sitting in a movie, I was watching this movie, I don't even remember which one it was, but it was a good one. And suddenly the camera moved to this thing, and I suddenly remember thinking to myself, this will sound so simple-minded, but nonetheless it was, for some reason it connected with me. He moved the camera to this thing, and I remember saying to myself, he did that because that's what he wants you to focus on. He wants you to look at that car. And that's what my mixing is all about in the studio, except you're doing it with sound. We want you to focus on this. And in the writing, it's the same thing. What is the idea? What is supposed to happen? What is the focus? And then the discipline is the rewriting to get it done. And that's work, actually. But it was just interesting that I really sat down and thought about all of this beforehand, oddly enough. I mean, I used to be the kind of person who would say, well, you know, just whatever happens, happens, we'll leave it at that. And because I've got a BA in English, so I ought to be a little good at this. I should have some small talent for it. So I did have, and I self-edit in my head. I've learned how to do that over the years pretty quickly and very accurately from a rhythmic and meter point of view. But of course, you could really make it than that, and that's what focus and discipline are about. And this one, as I spent 3 months on it, which may not seem like really a whole lot of time, but for me it was. A lot of it was just, well, aside from the 3 months writing it, I haven't had a record out for almost 3 years. I had a lot of time to think. So by the time I sat down to write, I'd been really thinking about these things for years now. A number of people have talked to me about this album, and they say, it's really very brutal, or it's violent, and this and that. And I also think, though, there's a lot of things in it that are very, very funny. I mean, and the humorous things are put in there on purpose, for sure, to give you a break, because it would be unrelenting if you don't do that. I mean, I remember, when you'd read Shakespeare, after some incredibly tumultuous scene, there'll be a small comedy sketch. It's like vaudeville. He's always got a small comedy sketch going on. I'm always putting in the midst of it, some funny things. Or there'll be a song that's funny, like I Think I'm Sick of You is very funny. I think there are some lines that are sad and funny at exactly the same time, that you find yourself laughing at something that presented another way, you wouldn't even laugh at it. But the way it's presented, it's awful, but it's funny. And because you can make it funny, it allows you to look at it a little longer or not turn away from it. The shape of the album is very interesting to me as it goes from specifics and specific things happening to characters. Romeo and Juliet starts out with 2 characters, probably in their late teens. And the next song we have kids. You have Dirty Boulevard, we have a young kid, possibly a young version of the 2 people in Romeo and Juliet. And you see how they're growing up, how they might end up where the first song is. And then in the third song, you have some characters relating who very well could have been the parents of the kids in Dirty Boulevard. And then you go through some other characters who are wondering about ecology, and they're wondering about their relationships, they're wondering about should they have kids, they're wondering about things in general, they're wondering about, like, why are people throwing other people in front of trains on Thursdays instead of Tuesdays? Is it because of some strange train schedule? I mean, they're musing about things. And then suddenly when you get to side 2, there isn't any character in the first song. It's just about concepts. Just talking about concepts. And then that's Busload of Faith. And then I'm Sick of You is less generalized, more specific concepts, certainly regarding very specific people in New York City and the politics involved in it. And then it goes on and on until you get to the third song, the last song on the album, which is Dime Store Mystery, which in fact really is about the classic human problem. Why am I here? What does it all mean? If I drop dead today, do you think I better repent quick? And also it was because I'd been intrigued by Marty Scorsese's movie, The Last Temptation of Christ, and his interpretation of Christ's character, which I just thought it was really fascinating. And in Man, the division in man, which philosophers always talked about, the animal nature, the spiritual nature. And in Last Temptation of Christ, this sounds pretentious, but I'm in it already, I might as well go on, that the goodly nature, godly nature, human nature, and the battle between the two. Well, I called it Dime Store Mystery, which I felt was kind of like an ironic comment on this constant dwelling on a question that you can be very concerned about, and then from another point of view, you could call it tacky, like, as some people do, like, so what? But in the end, I found the song had led me into St. Patrick's Cathedral, and I realized that's where I went to Annie's funeral, the wake there. And I realized I'd moved, from that concept of Christ over to, this real person I knew who had died, and what must he have been thinking? And so I dedicated the song to Andy. Right now, I'm working on a project that'll go on at St. Anne's Church in January, and hopefully we'll be at the Brooklyn Academy of Music in the fall. And it's a little tribute to Andy Warhol, John Cale. The way I got involved with the Sun City video was some of the people running it got in touch with me. Said, as one of the New York people who you might want to call. And from there, that's where I met Bono, that's where I met Ruben Blades. It was really interesting. Our segment was filmed by Jonathan Demme, who's obviously a really talented man. And it was a good experience. One of the other things that was a great experience was the benefit for the homeless that Paul Simon put together at Madison Square Garden, where I got to to back up Dion as a background singer. And it was James Taylor and myself, Paul Simon, Bruce Springsteen, Ruben Blades, Billy Joel, and I did the bass part. Yep, whoa. Yeah. Anyway, I told Dion because he said, I'm going to take him on the road, meaning me, because I'd waited all my life to do that, be able to sing, doo-wop, bass part, background. So it was particularly thrilling for me to have Dion on my record. He sings the background of Dirty Boulevard. He's that great high voice at the end. Speaking of focus, I brought that voice about as far up as you could without it being completely out of the question. I just wanted you to I wanted to be able to hear it. I just put it up to where I didn't have to lean in and, geez, I liked it, so I essentially make the records for myself also. It's really fascinating to record in New York. You hear what I mean? See, I miss that there's a little something. Is it something I said? Anyway, I've recorded in Montserrat. I've recorded out of New York, not really that much, but I have recorded out of New York. I like to record in New York because there's something about it that energizes the record, that puts an edge to the record somehow. There's a lot of pressure when we record in New York. Just getting to the studio can be an adventure, whereas other places, you can just concentrate on your work. But in New York, just going to the studio, you don't know what happens. For instance, the very first day in the studio, getting things set up, we just started recording. All of a sudden, the lights flicker and the tape machine stopped. We worried our tape had been injured. It hadn't been. We said, what's going on? They said, well, there's an electrical problem in the whole city. Now, I remember years ago, literally when the Street Hassle album was made, when there was a complete brownout in New York, and the tape had also gotten stuck, but it hadn't been stretched, and that's when people were running around the city and liberating TV sets and things like this, and it was hilarious. In this particular case, we went outside, and the news guy on the corner said to us, did you see what happened? We said, no, we were just, what happened? He said, well, there's this, they're having another brownout, and the manhole cover blew 12 or 20 feet straight up with flames shooting out of the street. I said, well, we're getting all the bad luck out of the way at the beginning. We'll just, that's it. So we had to call the session that night because it was too iffy using the tape machine. But, that's part and parcel of recording in New York City. In New York City, the album is there are a lot of other people making the other kind of records and satisfying other kind of needs through recording, but I thought with a record that there's so much going on out there that it was really important that this album address these concerns and these problems and these things that are going on. That's why in the liner notes of the record I said you try to treat this as you would a novel or a movie and listen to it straight through, because the songs are intertwined and there's a sequence that really matters, and you'll get a lot more out of it if you listen to it straight through and take it with a degree of seriousness, because it's meant to be a serious album. It's aimed at adults. It's supposed to be something a mature person could listen to and get something out of. I think music can change the world. I think it has changed the world, and I think it still can. And the thing that I think about a lot is there's a person listening to the music and they're wearing headphones these days with their Walkman. And when they put those headphones on, I've got them in a one-to-one situation, and I could really talk to them, which I always try to make it one-to-one on the records. I'm made for headphones.